What's up, everyone? We're here with the guide for if you want to dive into loadout definitions and really just, just get in there and have some fun, right? If you want to learn how to start using them and just kind of get comfortable with them, you've come to the right place. So, we're at the home screen. We're just going to go, for right now, I believe it will show up as the playground beta. In, the next couple of weeks after this video comes out, it, I believe, will become the proper playground. But, so you head to the playground beta. You're going to see this screen right here. If you're not necessarily interested in creating them, don't worry about this screen immediately. Look for the fourth tab here that says template. And if you just want to, get started from the library of existing loadouts, this library will be expanding over time. It's going to be a slightly narrow offering at launch of kind of tackling modes as they are coming up next. So we have LSTB coming up next. Going to be focusing on making sure we get as many LSTB loadouts as possible. But yeah, this is just going to keep growing, folks. It's a one-way road and it's just going to keep getting better. So let's say we have one loadout and we just want to, let's go back to LSTB. Let's say you want to use Shakti clones. You will notice a few things right off the bat. We do have a kind of a system that's in the middle of being ported right now. We have this system called tiering. So if we sort by top tier, this is loadouts that I've built that are really just kind of targeting accounts that have ridiculous mod depth. This is just kind of me saying, you've got crazy options, I've got crazy options. Let's just take these teams to their absolute maximum. Don't be surprised or even concerned if you can't hit these. These are kind of by design built to be a little bit ridiculous. And then you can see from there we have high tier, mid tier, and beginner tier. All these tiers are kind of trading off some stats or some other stats to try to give you a more realistic automation while still trying to ensure that for whatever the purpose of the loadout is, you will still be able to achieve, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Now, the goal here is to try to be as flexible for as many players as possible. It's, everyone's got different mods, everyone's got different characters, so I've tried to avoid giving raw stat targets where possible. Of course, even like relic levels, right? Just creates a whole huge mess. But yeah, these next few days, we're going to keep pushing good content out. And if you've got any sort of requests or interests, the plan is to kind of hit on everything over time. I know everything is very big, and of course we're not going to be able to manage to hit everything. There's so many team combinations, but most of the main things you could think of needing for most major modes, this is going to be a long-term project, and I'm excited because any loadout we put out here is just going to be time saved down the road, right? So yeah, let's say JTR. JTR is one of my favorites for LSTB. This is a loadout that I came up with like a year ago or something that allows JTR to even win in phase 3 against the double B2 double sniper comp. So we'll click load on the left side and you will get taken straight back to this unit screen. So right off the bat, you'll probably start seeing some red, probably start seeing some yellow. And this just means, red means that there is a minimum that is set on the targets that the character currently isn't meeting, which all you're seeing right now is just the mods that you currently have equipped. And yellow means it's kind of like it's called the desired. It's a little bit of like a stretch goal, just for if you have mods that can try to fit it, it would be nice to have, but it's not necessarily make or break. So we can see, no surprise, some red, some yellow, right? So we're here just without even touching anything, right? You can just try to do a quick automate. Now here we have a pretty decent number of sliders and settings. I would suggest probably keep this on. It warns you this can increase time significantly. This just means this is the number of searches it will do after it finds the first loadout that can successfully hit the targets. Simulate mods at 60. I've generally not felt the need to do this for now, although it has kind of pointed out some mods to me that I should check out in the future. Not a bad feature, but for now I just kind of like to work with the mods I have instead of, it feels like it's like gonna hand me a shopping list of like, sir, I don't have these slicing maps right now. That's your call. Auto reorder on failed target. This is something you can kind of shut off if you're just kind of tinkering and doing some trial and error. If you're doing like single automates, this can increase the time here and there if you're, doing like a couple of characters repeatedly. So I would, maybe consider shutting this off for experimentation. But the moment that you're doing a full serious remod, I think it's worth keeping this on. And we have smooth speed on required targets. This just means that it will look at the speed target that is given to you, and it will look at the speed secondary average that would be needed to hit that speed. And it's going to make sure that the algorithm tries to avoid doing something like combining a 27 with a 10 speed or something like that, right? If all you need is like a 20 average, it will try to maintain that 20 average. And last but not least, we have attempt desired targets, which is, most of the loadouts that I put out, almost all the loadouts that I put out will have these desired targets as just kind of like extra stretch goals if you have the mod depth, let's say. And yeah, I would recommend, at least if you're using my loadouts, I would definitely say leave this on for the most part. And last but not least, derived requirements kind of works in tandem with auto reorder on failed target. This just means that if, let's say we're talking like cheaper modding, right? Let's say you have Gideon being the fastest character, and then Piet speed is dependent on Gideon. And then let's say auto reorder can't hit Piet, so it suddenly bumps Piet's priority above Gideon. Piet will be able to check with Gideon to figure out what his requirement is. I would also recommend leaving this on. It's a way to help keep the bot more flexible. So let's go ahead and click OK. Here we are, we got to run the automation through, and let's see what we're looking at. Looks like we got through everything successfully. We see no red or yellow. You kind of just do a quick up and down to see what worked and what didn't. So this was kind of our best case scenario, right? But let's say, what if it wasn't? What if we need to make sure we get in and start dropping things lower, right? Maybe our collection just isn't quite able to make it work. Yeah, let's get on into it. So here we have R2. Let's go ahead and check what's kind of under the hood for R2. So this page here is the stats. This is the stat weighting for what stats are generally considered to be most important by the bot. I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about changing these. Generally, if the person building the loadout is good at it, these should kind of make sense for whatever is being set here, unless you're changing things around pretty significantly. But we have the required, which is the absolute minimums before it's considered a failure if it falls beneath it. And then we have the desired. The desired is an optional part of the required, so you see a minimum of 320 here. It will try for the 330, and if it can't while hitting the crit chance, then it will just drop that ball. So we go through, we see not necessarily any primary set here. We could go through if it potentially helps. And yeah. Set wise as well. And must use any. Probably between crit chance, speed, must use all would make sense here. This is a loadout. This is kind of missing a decent amount of features here. So this is a pretty good example of kind of cleaning up and optimizing. He does have a little bit of a potency goal, so I don't think I would necessarily mind seeing a potency cross either. And so yeah, let's see. Maybe in some cases, you know that 330 is a little bit too steep. Maybe you could leave it, maybe not. 320, you can maybe drop down to about 310. It's nothing crazy beyond just 310, right? This is not some crazy complex loadout here, at least for R2. But if you're having trouble with other potential characters, if we open something like JTR, this will give us something a little bit more complex, right? You'll see very quickly we have a relative compare. We see down on this compare option, BB8 has been selected. And then in this case, there's no operators happening here. This is just simply JTR must be at least within 15 speed of BB8. BB8 can get pretty high in speed, so this is just kind of a loose rubber band. And then the desired is just the same thing, but a little bit more aggressive, right? Saying that she should at least try to stay as close as she can. Let's go one further, a little bit more complicated. Here we can see C-3PO, kind of the same boat, but in this case, there is, honestly, I would actually say if this loadout was built responsibly, I think we should kind of subsidize some of the stats happening here. So essentially the reason why it was 20 is because we were looking at C-3PO unique, but we can actually kind of keep them separated and abstract, even though it's roughly the same thing, just because we're just kind of trying to keep things a little bit more obvious, I guess, for ourselves as well as other people potentially. But again, the operators aren't all that complex. Let's see, if there was one that was going to be here. Yeah, we have BB-8 in between 20 under R2 and 1 under R2. R2 makes a massive amount of turn meter with that flamethrower AoE in phase 3 fights and when not against Magni-Guard. So BB-8 doesn't necessarily have to be trying to match R2. It's just, not a bad thing if you're able to hit it. Let's see. JTR overall is a little bit too simple. So let's find a team that really has some stuff going on under the hood. Let's go to BAM. So, very quickly, this is a team that does involve clocking. You will see these operators. For example, we have the right operator times 0.75. This is saying we are taking Queel speed as the compare target. Stat, same stat as this, meaning we are checking speed. And we are saying Beskar wants to be 1 over Queel times 0.75. Queel being the character that gives 25% turn meter to his team. And so times 0.75 is, the effective speed BAM would need to be based off of Queel. We have set the minimum to 0, meaning greater than or equals to that minimum with no changes. In this case, we'd actually want to turn round up on. And then depending on what we want, I'm kind of a stickler for speed. If you're using this for personal use, I actually kind of like the idea of keeping the min and max pretty narrow. I would be careful with this. You are limiting the bot's options greatly, and A, that can take a little bit longer to find, and B, sometimes it will just be unable to find it if it's if you've given it some crazy requirements and one specific speed it can return on, right? That's a very difficult task, and sometimes your collection just might not be able to deliver on that request. So keep in mind, if you're doing this, it's a little bit of a risk, but at the same time, if you're like me, if you want to make sure not a single drop of speed goes to waste, it's not necessarily the wrong call either. With this BAM team, we did not check import unit priority order when we did it. So quick example here, right? We know kind of the general order that BAM teams want to operate in. We could also check in the requirement summary, and we can see Mandalorian is referencing Queel and whatnot. Because of the derived requirements, I actually would not be surprised if we hit this automate. I actually bet that it would pretty successfully work here. All right, so here we have the automate, and let's see how it did, right? So even though things are out of order, you can see it tried to reach Queel, kind of brought things lower, but overall it actually did pretty okay. If we wanted to take manual control back over the order, if we go to basic view here, we can go ahead and do stuff like drag Queel back to the top. We know IG11. Generally it goes Queel, BAM, IG11, and then the rest. Nest, this loadout has last, and then honestly, we're only really kind of using one of these characters. This loadout includes 9 characters, but you're really supposed to select down 1 character from the 4 flex slot options. So yeah, we have a pretty, decent attempt on the first time around, but let's try this one more time. And yeah, let's just see how you can do with Queel now without having to derive all those requirements. All right, and there we see it. So even though it is able to kind of get the job done without proper ordering, it does seem to me that proper ordering is still pretty important to make sure that we're maintaining, as we were able to suddenly hit the desired, whereas before the bot was not doing so. Now, ideally, the loadouts should be uploaded with the proper order maintained, so, for the most part, this shouldn't be a concern, but it's definitely something worth thinking about, right? Not too bad. And yeah, so in this case, we have a successful automate if we know that this is a BAM team or BAM loadout we want to save. We have file, we have save as, and we could go ahead and either push us to the game, but also if you leave include loadout checked, then the moment we go to our loadouts, if we go ahead and give it 1 second to load, and so you can see the BAM loadout we already had prepared saved here. You can see it's blue, meaning it has a loadout definition associated with it. And if we go to click the edit button, then it will just take us straight back to the Queel team, and we can see all of the stuff we had saved. And from there, we can make any tweaks if we want. If we decide, okay, maybe 356 was kind of funny, or a 352 desired, maybe we bring that down to 340 or something like that, right? You totally have that option. You can save it. You can go ahead and do the same thing, run your automate, and get your updated loadout. And that's all you have to do. Now, let's talk about multi-import, because that's where things can start to get a little bit chaotic. Let's just go down the line for all the 3v3 stuff. This is quite the undertaking, all right? So, I got the whole big kahuna. This is not every 3v3 team, but this is every 3v3 loadout I have made so far. That will be in your hands sooner rather than later. Not necessarily at launch, but soon. Let's go ahead and click import. And I think it's a good idea to just go into basic view instantly. Now, if we go into basic, we can do stuff like order by speed. It will look at the speed requirements being given to characters relatively and kind of weight them accordingly. I feel like we got a weird BAM loadout in. We might have accidentally pulled the BAM LSTV loadout. That is a very fast Omega suddenly. But yeah, overall, you know, everything looks pretty solid here. We see Luke wanting to be slow. Veer is pretty slow. At the same time, we see like Piet hanging out pretty fast. Malik absolutely being fast. Revan, Dooku, all those characters for sure. We're doing a lot of stuff in a lot of those loadouts. Don't even worry about it. It's crazy times. But yeah, we see, you know, everything is showing some missing issues. But so far, kind of it feels like maybe we could try to do some initial pre-ordering just to try to cover our butts. But aside from order by speed or a little bit of manual dragging, you kind of just have to automate it. So let's use this Malik as an example. In this case, it successfully hit, but let's say we know that our protection primaries aren't necessarily the best depth-wise. I did kind of choose the bulk stats because I knew that my collection could sustain them while maintaining this high speed, but you know, everyone's collection is different. So let's say protection, health, defense. We could either start to disable these restrictions and kind of turn this into more of a speed hunt, but also as you know your mod collection, you probably know better than anyone else what mods you kind of have lying around available. And so you could actually start to add weights to kind of favor the mods or favor the algorithm towards the mods you have in mind, as well as you could also tell, like, if you know that you're Malik, if you've got like some crazy good tenacity sets with like 20, you know, whatever high-end speed, you could just tell the bot, hey, right? Just because you're kind of cheating the bot towards the solution you're looking for, there's nothing really wrong with that, as long as I think you're doing it for personal use, right? If I put this into a loadout and shared this with someone else, I could get some really bad results, right? Tenacity especially, you either got it or you don't, and more likely than not, they don't have much of it, and it probably isn't even that fast, right? You need to be careful with when you're making these types of changes. I think it's incredibly good to make these types of changes, right? Part of what I think makes this bot so special is we can kind of, I keep on calling it cheating, but we're just kind of tweaking these definitions to synergize with our mod collection as much as possible. But again, best when left for personal use. If you're writing definitions for your guild, I would recommend trying to avoid stat targets where possible, especially if your guild isn't necessarily on the same level in terms of relics. If you do something like set a protection target for Malik, and at least, you know, if you're going to do it, maybe put it in desired because it will be then optional. But if you put it in required, maybe some of your guildmates have like a relic 3 Malik, it's just going to reject them, right? And to me, I think if you're sharing loadouts with people, A, you want to avoid specificity like this. Speed set's a pretty safe bet, especially if this is like, you know, it's a fast Malik, right? It's a 352 Malik. You can build a 352 Malik without a speed set, more power to you, right? But as long as we are keeping things flexible and kind of open-ended, right, we have some weights that are pretty strongly determined to push any Malik stimming towards a pretty bulky direction. But at the same time, we are leaving the door open for mod collections that are having trouble to try to at least bring something together, right? Right. Now, as of the time of you finishing a full automate, you can actually go to export loadout definition. And you can see, I actually think it's a decent idea to make a loadout definition of a full multi-load that you have successfully tweaked, right? If you're lucky enough and you just multi-load a bunch of stuff and the automate happens successfully, more power to you. Fantastic, right? At the same time, though, I think it's worth noting that there are just going to be some cases where you've had to make a bunch of tweaks, and while you will also be able to save the loadout and it will be associated, I kind of like having both. You know, you will have the loadout with that associated, but I kind of just like, it's like a checkpoint, right? It's like, all right, we got the work done, we got the tweaks done that we, you know, needed done and made, and feels good, right? It's a reliable save point that we know that we can successfully automate. You know, it's a little bit messy, I do think, to some degree. If you know that maybe you loaded the Queel targets, and the Queel in this loadout is pretty crazy. It's asking for like 345-ish. Maybe you're like, man, this loadout has been working so nice for me, but this 345 is just not really doing it. you would, probably make that tweak in a multi-load and then save that in a multi-load. But I do also think that, like, if you've been making tweaks and this is just a BAM team that works better for you, I also think that is perfectly within reason to just go ahead and save your own, right? Go ahead and make your own BAM and name it whatever you want, and it's up to you. So yeah, that's kind of the general overview. There is like a review system here where you can see like the mods that the bot gave you compared to what you have in game, all that sorts of good stuff for comparisons, as well as you can compare against other loadouts you've already made. Very nice and comprehensive. But overall, I think this is at least a solid starting foundation for where to go from here. The tier system, I think I would really try to pay attention to this. If you try a top thing, don't necessarily sweat it if you can't make it. At the same time, if you're multi-loading especially, right? Multi-loading top tier is going to be nuts if you don't have insane mod depth. High tiers, mid tiers, certainly more manageable. And at the same time, right? Maybe you want a top tier of 1 team and high tier of 2 teams and mid tier of 5 teams, right? There's no real right or wrong answer there. You kind of just need to know what your collection's capable of and get a feel for where the bot will and won't push back on you, because the bot will just blatantly tell you, hey, you don't really have the gas to be able to run this gas loadout. So, I think it's just like, think of it as like a dialogue, right? That's why so much of this really just kind of comes down to go in, make a couple of tweaks, change a couple of numbers, and then just re-automate. You can just re-automate one single character, or once you've solved things and we would need to continue to hit Dengar, we can hit the continue button to the left below automate, and that will mean that it hits this character and then everyone else below them. We don't need to necessarily sit through all of this, but you get the idea, right? So that's kind of the simple rundown. It's you can get way more in depth than this, you can get way less in depth than this, but the hope is that you can at least get in, start importing, trying out these loadouts, and if you are getting a little bit of pushback, definitely either try a lower tier or get in there and get your hands a little bit dirty and get to tweaking. Everyone's mods are different, and I think part of the joy is just discovering the best team that your roster is currently capable of making, and the bot is quite good at doing that. That'll be it on my end. Thanks for watching.